The letter she never sent. Do you ever wonder what happens to feelings that never find words? What if two souls meet, drift apart, and still carry each other in silence? This is not about fame or movies. It's about two people who met before the world knew their story. It began long before red carpets and flashing lights. Back then, Keanu was just a quiet young man trying to make sense of the world. He had known pain early in life, and it taught him to listen more than he spoke. Sandra, on the other hand, was filled with light. She was loud when she laughed, kind when others weren't, and endlessly curious about the smallest things. They met during an audition that neither expected to change their lives. The movie was supposed to be just another project, something professional, something to pay the bills. But from the first day on set, something felt different. People around them noticed the way their energies fit together, as if calm and chaos had found balance. She teased him for being too quiet. He smiled at her for being too full of life. In the long pauses between takes, they talked, not about fame or scripts, but about family, loneliness, and what peace really meant. Keanu admired how she saw goodness even in pain. She admired how he carried pain with grace. They never said the word love, not once. But every time she brought him coffee without asking how he liked it, every time he waited for her after late shoots to walk her to the car, something deeper formed, something real and unspoken. When filming ended, they hugged longer than friends usually do. He whispered, "Thank you for making me smile again." She replied, "You should do that more often." That was it. No promises, no goodbyes filled with tears. Just two people pretending they were fine when they weren't. Months passed. Sandra got busy with new roles, new fame, and endless interviews. Keanu disappeared into his quiet world again, often driving for hours without destination, listening to old music, thinking about moments that felt almost like home. Neither called, neither wrote. Yet both felt a strange emptiness that success couldn't fill. Years later, their paths crossed again. Another movie, another coincidence. The spark was still there, but this time, both carried more scars. Sandra had learned that fame doesn't protect the heart, and Keanu had learned that kindness often gets mistaken for weakness. They met in the dressing room before the first reading. For a moment, neither spoke. Then she smiled. That same playful smile from years ago. "Long time," she said. He nodded, eyes soft. Too long. The chemistry returned like it had never left. The crew felt it. The fans saw it. Even the director joked that the movie didn't need dialogue when the looks between them said everything. But again, both were careful. They knew the cost of opening old wounds. Still, when cameras stopped, rolling, she would find excuses to talk to him about things that didn't matter. A scene, a memory, a song she thought he'd like. And he would listen, quietly, with the same warmth he once had. But something was different this time. Keanu had been through loss, a kind of loss that changes a person forever. There were nights when he couldn't sleep, haunted by memories of people he'd loved and lost. Sandra noticed the tiredness in his eyes, the pauses in his sentences. One evening, as they waited for a late-night shoot, she asked softly, "Does it still hurt?" He looked at her for a long moment and said, "Some pain never leaves. It just learns to live quietly inside you." She didn't reply, but her eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. That night, she went home and wrote a letter. A letter she never sent. It said, "I wish I had told you how much you changed the way I see kindness. I wish I had told you that your silence taught me more about love than anyone's words ever could." She folded it carefully and kept it in her journal, tucked between movie notes and old photographs. As months passed, their bond deepened again. They shared dinners after long shoots, laughed about old memories, and found comfort in each other's company. Yet every time one of them got too close, something invisible pulled them back. Maybe it was fear. Maybe it was timing. Maybe it was the weight of the lives they had built separately. When the film wrapped, Sandra felt a quiet panic. She knew this might be the last time she'd see him like this. Not as a co-star, but as the man who once made her believe in quiet love. At the final wrap party, surrounded by laughter and celebration, she looked at him from across the room. He was standing alone, smiling faintly at the crowd. She wanted to walk up to tell him everything she had written, but her courage failed her. Instead, she whispered to a friend, "He's the kind of person you meet once in life and never forget." And she left early. Keanu noticed her leave, his heart sinking in the familiar silence. When someone asked if he was okay, he simply said, "Some goodbyes don't need words." That night, he drove home through empty streets, the rain tapping softly on his car window. Every song on the radio seemed to know their story. In the years that followed, both of them grew in different directions. She won awards, started charities, raised awareness for causes close to her heart. He continued choosing roles that reflected his quiet strength. Their names were often linked in interviews, and fans loved imagining that maybe, just maybe, there was something deeper behind their on-screen magic. When asked about her connection with him, Sandra once smiled and said, "He's the best kind of human, humble, honest, and real." And when someone asked Keanu the same, he simply said, "She makes the world brighter." But behind those words were years of letters unsent, calls never made, and feelings left untouched, until one unexpected moment. It was during an award show, years later. Sandra was backstage, rehearsing her lines, when a quiet voice behind her said, "You still remember them perfectly." She turned. It was Keanu, older now, eyes softer, smile slower. For a few seconds, time stopped. He congratulated her, she thanked him, and then silence again. But this time there was no awkwardness, no distance, only understanding. When the show ended, they sat together in the corner of the green room, away from cameras. She asked, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if we had tried?" He looked down for a moment, then met her eyes and said, "I think we did try. We just didn't know it back then." Her eyes softened. "Do you still believe in timing?" "I believe in people who never forget," he replied. She smiled, and for the first time in years, he saw the same warmth that once brought him peace. Then his phone rang. He stood up to answer, but before leaving, he looked back at her. "Some stories never end, Sandra. They just pause." And he walked away. That night, Sandra went home and opened her old journal. The letter was still there, untouched by time. She unfolded it slowly, tears falling as she whispered, "I guess I still never sent it." She didn't know that miles away, Keanu sat by his window, staring at a photo from that first film set, both of them laughing in the sunlight. He smiled softly and whispered to himself, "Maybe love never leaves. It just changes shape." The screen fades to black, but before it does, we hear her voice reading that unsent letter in silence. And just when the audience feels the warmth of closure, a sudden knock at her door breaks the quiet night. When she opens it, she gasps. The night of the unexpected visitors. Some nights carry a strange weight, as if time itself holds its breath. That evening, Sandra stood frozen at the doorway, her fingers still on the handle. Outside, rain whispered against the concrete, and the city lights blurred behind the mist. For a moment, she thought her mind was playing tricks on her. But it wasn't. Standing there, half soaked from the rain, was Keanu. He looked different, older, quieter, but still with that same gentleness in his eyes. He gave a small smile, the kind that hides both warmth and hesitation. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," he said softly. Sandra blinked, her heart beating faster than she wanted to admit. "No, not at all. I just wasn't expecting you." He nodded slowly, brushing the rain from his jacket. I was driving and I saw the lights on. Thought maybe you'd still be awake. His voice was calm, almost fragile. He didn't seem like the man the world called a legend. He seemed like someone who had been carrying too many quiet nights inside him. She stepped aside. Come in, before you catch a cold. As he walked in, she noticed the small details. His shoes wet from the rain, his hands slightly trembling, and a tiredness around his shoulders. She closed the door gently, still unsure if this was a dream. For a few seconds, neither spoke. The room felt full of memories, laughter, old glances, shared silences. The air between them was thick with everything they hadn't said years ago. You look the same, she finally said, trying to ease the heaviness. He smiled faintly. You look stronger. She laughed lightly, though her voice shook. I had to be. He looked around her living room. There were books stacked in corners, soft lamps glowing, a faint scent of candles in the air. He noticed a framed photograph of her with some of her rescue dogs and another, a picture from their old movie set. She followed his gaze. You remember that day? He nodded. How could I forget? You made everyone laugh when the camera broke. And you made coffee for the whole crew because you felt bad for the delay, she said with a smile. You've always been that person. He looked at her for a long moment, his eyes reflecting something deeper. Maybe that's why I came here tonight. I didn't want to keep being the person who stays silent. She felt her chest tighten. Keanu, what's going on? He hesitated, his fingers brushing against the edge of the couch. I've been thinking a lot lately about the past, about things I never said, and after seeing you again at the award show, something felt unfinished. She stayed quiet, afraid that if she spoke, her voice would break. I know we both had our paths, he continued, and maybe that's how it was meant to be. But I don't want to leave anything unsaid anymore, not with you. Her eyes softened. You don't owe me anything. He shook his head. It's not about owing. It's about truth. There was a pause. The rain outside grew heavier, tapping rhythmically against the window like a metronome to their silence. He took a slow breath. There was a time, he said, when you were the calm in my storm. You didn't even know it, but you saved me in ways I couldn't explain. I used to think kindness like yours was just acting, but it wasn't. It was real, and I never forgot that. She blinked back tears. Keanu, why are you telling me this now? He looked down for a moment, then met her eyes again. Because I lost too many chances in life thinking time would wait. And I don't want to lose this one. Her throat tightened and she had to look away. You always say things like that. Simple, honest, but impossible to ignore. He gave a faint smile. It's the only way I know how to speak. She walked to the kitchen, pretending to look for tea just to steady herself. Her hands shook as she reached for the cups. She could feel his presence behind her, the same quiet warmth she remembered from years ago. Still drink herbal? He asked gently. She turned with a half smile. Still hate sugar? He chuckled softly. Some things don't change. When she handed him the cup, their fingers brushed. It was nothing, just a second, but it carried years of unspoken history. She quickly pulled back, pretending not to notice. They sat on the couch, the steam from their tea fogging the air slightly. The room was quiet except for the rain and the faint hum of the refrigerator. Do you ever think about it? She asked suddenly. He looked up. About what? Us. What could have been if we hadn't let fear win? He took a slow breath, eyes distant. Every time I see the sunrise, her chest ached. Then why didn't you ever reach out? He stared into his cup for a long moment. Because I thought you moved on. I didn't want to be another ghost from your past. She smiled sadly. You already were. Just one that never left. He looked at her then. Really looked. His eyes held that same quiet pain she'd seen years ago, the one that made her want to protect him. You think people can meet again after so many missed chances? He asked. Maybe not in the same way, she said softly, but maybe in a better one. He nodded slowly, absorbing her words. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out something small, a folded piece of paper, worn and slightly faded. He placed it on the table between them. I found this today, he said. She frowned, unfolding it carefully. Her breath caught when she saw what it was, her old letter, the one she never sent. "Where did you get this?" she whispered. "You left it inside a book you gave me on the last day of filming," he said quietly. "I never opened it until last week." Her hands trembled. "You read it?" He nodded slowly. Every word. She felt exposed, as if time had undone all her careful silence. "And what did you think?" she asked, barely above a whisper. He leaned back, eyes soft. "I thought it was the most beautiful thing anyone ever didn't say to me." Tears welled in her eyes. "You weren't supposed to see it." "Maybe I was," he said gently. "Maybe that's why I came tonight." For a long time, they sat in silence. The kind of silence that doesn't feel empty but sacred. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance and a soft wind brushed against the curtains. She looked at him and saw not the movie star, not the public figure, but the man she once trusted more than words. "What now?" she asked quietly. He smiled faintly. "I don't know. Maybe we just start with tea." They laughed softly, the sound breaking the heaviness between them. It felt like breathing again after holding air for years. He leaned back, relaxed for the first time all evening. She looked at him, wondering if fate really gave second chances or if this was just a moment borrowed from time. As the night deepened, their conversation drifted from old memories to dreams, to fears, to the things they'd lost and learned. They talked until the rain stopped, until dawn began to hint behind the curtains. And for the first time in years, Sandra felt peace. The kind that comes from being exactly where you were meant to be, even if it took a lifetime to arrive. But just as the first light of morning touched the window, Keanu's phone buzzed. His expression changed. He looked at the screen, then at her. His face grew pale. "Is everything okay?" she asked. He hesitated, then stood up slowly. "I have to go. It's something important." Her voice wavered. "Will you come back?" He looked at her with eyes full of quiet sadness. "I want to. I really do." He placed the empty cup on the table, walked toward the door, and paused. "Thank you for letting me be honest tonight," he said softly. Before she could answer, he was gone. She stood by the window, watching his car disappear into the misty dawn. Something about his tone, the look in his eyes, unsettled her deeply. It felt like goodbye, but not the ordinary kind. It felt final. Her heart whispered that something was wrong. She didn't know that in the next few hours. She would find out the truth. One that would change everything she thought she knew about him. The secret behind his silence. The morning after Keanu left, Sandra couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The air in her home still carried his presence. The faint scent of rain from his jacket, the untouched cup on the table, the quietness that followed truth. She kept replaying the way he said goodbye, the strange weight behind his eyes. It wasn't casual. It wasn't uncertain. It was as if he already knew something she didn't. She tried to distract herself, going through her morning routine like nothing had happened. She walked her dogs, answered a few calls, and smiled politely when her assistant mentioned a new script offer. But her mind refused to rest. It kept returning to that moment and the letter, the rain, and his sudden departure. By noon, her calm had turned into unease. She picked up her phone, hesitated for a moment, and dialed his number. It rang twice, then went to voicemail. She tried again. Nothing. "Maybe he's busy," she whispered to herself, though her voice betrayed doubt. By evening, worry turned into quiet panic. She checked the news, thinking maybe there had been an event, an emergency, anything to explain his sudden disappearance. There was nothing. 3 days passed. 3 long, heavy days. No call, no text, no message. Not from him, not from anyone who knew him. On the 4th morning, she woke to an envelope slid under her door. There was no name, no address, just her name written in neat handwriting. Her heart skipped. She picked it up slowly and opened it. Inside was a short note. "He wanted you to have this if he couldn't say goodbye properly." Attached to it was a small USB drive. Her fingers trembled as she sat down on the couch, staring at it. Part of her wanted to call someone, maybe his assistant, maybe the police, but another part of her whispered that this was something personal, something meant only for her. She plugged it into her laptop. There was only one file inside, titled For You. She clicked it. The screen faded into darkness, then slowly brightened. Keanu's face appeared. He was sitting near a window, light falling softly on one side of his face. He looked calm, but his eyes told a different story. Eyes tired from carrying too much silence. "Hey, Sandra," he began softly. "If you're watching this, it probably means I didn't get to see you again." She froze, her heartbeat echoing in her ears. "There are things I wanted to tell you that night," he continued, "but I couldn't find the courage. I thought maybe if I said them in person, they'd sound easier. But the truth never gets easier." He paused, his gaze steady but heavy. "I've been sick, Sandra. For a while now. The doctors said it's manageable, but I know my body better than anyone. I didn't want to make it public, and I didn't want pity. I just wanted peace. And somehow, when I saw you again, I felt that peace return. That's why I came that night. Not to say goodbye, but to remember what hope felt like." Tears spilled down her face before she realized she was crying. She covered her mouth, trying not to sob. "You once told me," he said, smiling faintly, "that kindness doesn't need to be loud. I've lived by that. And if I've done anything good in this life, it's because you reminded me that gentle hearts can still change the world." He looked away for a moment, as if gathering courage. "You probably wonder why I never said anything before. I guess I didn't want to burden you. You've carried enough already. I just wanted you to know that what we shared, those quiet moments, those laughs, those silences, they were real to me. Maybe the most real thing I ever had." He took a breath, his voice trembling slightly. "I don't know what's ahead. Maybe I'll fight this longer than they think. Maybe I won't. But if I don't, promise me one thing. Don't turn this into sadness. Turn it into light. You always knew how to do that." He smiled faintly, eyes soft. "Thank you for being my calm, Sandra. And if there's another lifetime, I hope we meet sooner, when we're both brave enough to stay." The video ended. For a long time she sat in silence, her hands trembling, tears streaming down her face. The rain began again outside, soft and rhythmic, like the night he had come. She whispered his name, but the house gave her nothing back. The silence was too big, too deep, too final. For days, she couldn't sleep. She read old interviews, rewatched their movie, and found herself pausing at every scene where their eyes met. It wasn't acting. She could see it now, the quiet affection hidden behind every look, every smile. It had always been there, waiting to be acknowledged. A week later, the world found out. News outlets began to whisper rumors. "Keanu Reeves hospitalized," one headline said. "Fans send love and support." Another one read, "Actors' representatives decline to comment." Sandra closed her eyes, her heart heavy with helplessness. She wanted to see him, but she didn't know if she was supposed to. He had wanted peace, not pity. Yet how could she sit here while the world speculated about the man who once told her that kindness was enough? That night, she made a decision. She took the letter, the same one he had read, and placed it inside her coat pocket. Then she got into her car and drove, the city lights blurring past. She didn't know what she would say, only that she needed to see him, even if it was just to hold his hand one last time. When she reached the hospital, the security was tight. The media gathered outside. She wore a cap and mask, moving quietly through the side entrance where few noticed her. Inside, the hallways smelled like antiseptic and thyme. She found his room number with the help of a nurse who recognized her but said nothing. When she entered the room, he was asleep. Thin light filtered through the blinds, painting gentle shadows across his face. The steady rhythm of the monitor filled the silence. She moved closer, her heart aching at the sight of him, fragile, peaceful, but still unmistakably him. She sat by his bed and took his hand. It was cold, but the warmth beneath it was still there, faint but real. She whispered, "You always said you'd find peace quietly, but you didn't have to do it alone." His eyelids fluttered slightly. His voice, weak but soft, came through the stillness. "You came." She smiled through tears. "Of course I did." He turned his head slightly toward her, his lips curving into a small smile. "I knew you would." She squeezed his hand gently. "You scared me." "I didn't mean to," he whispered. "You never do," she said. "You just vanish." He gave a faint chuckle that faded into a sigh. Some things never change. She wiped her tears, then pulled the folded letter from her pocket. You kept this all those years, she said. So now I'm giving it back. But this time, I want you to hear it. He opened his eyes weakly, watching her as she unfolded the paper. Her voice trembled as she began to read. The same words she had written years ago, words that had stayed trapped between fear and love. She read until her voice broke, and he lifted his hand weakly to touch her cheek. It's the most beautiful letter, he whispered. It's not finished, she said softly, because I didn't know how it would end. Maybe this is how, he murmured, his fingers trembling against hers. The silence stretched, but it was full of meaning. For the first time, there was nothing left unsaid between them. Not the pain, not the longing, not the what-ifs, just truth, raw and human. She stayed with him through the night, watching the city lights flicker through the blinds, her head resting on his arm. Every breath he took felt fragile, sacred. Around dawn, he opened his eyes again. You remember what I said? He asked. About what? Stories that never end. She nodded, tears spilling quietly. This one won't either, he whispered. Just, don't let it fade. Then he closed his eyes again, falling into sleep. Deep, peaceful, silent. Sandra stayed by his side, holding his hand long after the sun rose. And as light filled the room, she realized something she hadn't before. Love doesn't always need forever to be real. Sometimes it just needs the courage to be known. But that wasn't the end. 2 days later, she received another envelope, this time with his handwriting on it, and what it contained would reveal a truth even deeper than love. The promise he left behind. The morning light was cold and soft when Sandra found the second envelope on her doorstep. She recognized his handwriting instantly. Gentle, precise, slightly leaning to the right. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. Her heart already knew it wasn't just another letter. It felt like a bridge between what was and what would never be again. She carried it to the kitchen table, where the faint smell of coffee lingered. She sat down slowly, staring at it as if opening it would make everything too real. After a long moment, she took a deep breath and tore it open. Inside was a folded page, a key, and a short note in his familiar calm tone. For when you're ready, you'll know where it leads. Her mind froze. There was no address, no explanation, just the key. She unfolded the page next. It wasn't long, but each line felt deliberate, like he had written it with the weight of time pressing on him. Dear Sandra, if you're reading this, it means I've gone where silence lives. I wanted to leave you something more than words, something that reminds you that kindness outlives everything. This key belongs to a small cabin north of the lake where we filmed our first movie. I bought it years ago but never told anyone. I used to go there when I needed peace. It's quiet there, you'll like it. Inside, you'll find something that belongs to both of us. I didn't finish it because I wanted you to. The words blurred as tears filled her eyes. She held the letter close to her chest, whispering his name again and again as if he might still hear. Then she looked at the key, small, silver, with a worn engraving. Hope. For the next 2 days, she couldn't think of anything else. She replayed their moments together, his quiet smiles, his last words. Finally, one dawn, she packed a small bag, put the letter safely inside, and drove toward the lake. The road was long and winding, surrounded by whispering trees and early morning fog. As she drove, the world outside seemed to blur. Mountains in the distance, birds cutting through the mist, the kind of silence that both heals and haunts. It felt as if every mile took her deeper into his memory. After several hours, she saw it. A small wooden cabin by the water, half hidden among tall pines. It looked untouched by time. The air smelled of rain and pine needles. She parked the car, stepped out, and stood for a moment, listening to the soft lapping of waves against the shore. The door creaked as she turned the key. Dust floated in the air, catching the morning light. The cabin was simple. One room, a small table, bookshelves filled with old notebooks, and a large window facing the lake. Everything inside felt like him. Quiet, purposeful, gentle. On the table, she found a canvas covered with a cloth. Beside it was a note in his handwriting. For both of us. Her fingers trembled as she lifted the cloth. Underneath was a painting, unfinished but breathtaking. It showed the two of them sitting on a wooden dock, backs turned toward the sunset. She recognized the scene immediately. It was from their last day of filming years ago. She remembered the orange light, the wind, the quiet peace of it. Except now in the painting, their hands were almost touching. Her tears fell freely as she stared at it. He had captured a moment that never happened, but one that both of them had silently wished for. Beside the painting lay his old journal. She opened it carefully. The first page was dated years ago. Every time I miss her, I paint the light the way she saw it. She turned the pages, sketches, small notes, fragments of thoughts. Each one carried traces of her, little reminders of laughter, small quotes she had once said. One line stopped her heart cold. She thinks she changed me, but the truth is, she reminded me who I was. She pressed her hand to the page, her body shaking with grief and love. She stayed there for hours, reading his words, feeling as though he were right beside her. Outside, the sun slowly sank, painting the water in gold. For a moment, it felt like time folded back, like everything lost was returning in whispers. That night, she lit the small fireplace. The cabin glowed softly in the orange light. She sat by the window, holding the journal, and whispered into the stillness. "You were right. This place feels like peace." She spent the night there, unable to sleep. Instead, she walked along the lake under the stars. Every sound, the wind, the water, the trees, felt alive with memories. She remembered his laughter when she tripped on a rock during filming, the way he had always helped others before himself, the quiet strength he carried in every silence. The next morning, she found something else, a small box hidden beneath the painting supplies. Inside was a collection of letters, each sealed and numbered. The first was labeled, "Open Now." She unfolded it. "You'll probably smile reading this. I can almost hear you saying, 'Why so mysterious?' But this isn't about sadness, Sandy. It's about gratitude. I left these letters for moments you'll need them most. I've written one for when you feel lonely, one for when you doubt yourself, and one for when you're ready to let go. You don't have to open them all at once. Just promise me you'll keep living in the light you gave me." Her tears came again, quiet and endless. She held the letters to her chest, whispering, "I promise." For weeks afterward, she returned to that cabin every few days. She painted where he left off, blending colors the way she remembered him describing them. Calm blues, soft golds, the colors of kindness. Slowly, the empty space between the two figures on the dock disappeared. She painted their hands touching. One afternoon, as she stood on the dock watching the sunset, she finally opened the second letter. "If you're reading this, it means you stayed. Thank you for not letting grief turn you cold. I left something for you in the drawer beneath the window. Use it when the world feels heavy." She ran inside, opened the drawer, and found an old camera. Taped to it was another note, "Capture the light. That's how you'll find me again." Her heart broke and healed all at once. She took the camera, pointed it toward the lake, and pressed the shutter. The click echoed softly like a heartbeat. Through the lens, she saw the reflection of sunlight on the water, the same warm glow that had followed him everywhere. As she stood there, a gentle wind brushed past her hair, not cold but kind, almost familiar. She smiled through tears and whispered, "I see you." But as the seasons passed, strange things began to happen. One day, she developed the photos from that camera, and in the last one, faintly visible in the reflection of the water, was a silhouette sitting beside her. She looked closer, her heart pounding. It was unmistakable. His outline, faint but peaceful, as if watching over her from somewhere beyond. That night, she returned to the cabin again. But when she opened the door this time, the painting had changed. The two figures were now holding hands. The message he wanted the world to hear weeks passed after Sandra found the painting changed and the silhouette in the photo. Every time she returned to the cabin, the air felt different. Not haunted, not heavy, but alive. It was as if something unseen waited for her to listen closely. Keanu had always believed that silence carried its own kind of truth, and now she was beginning to understand what he meant. One morning, while the sun was still low, she sat on the dock with her coffee and one of his letters on her lap. This one was marked, "Open when you're ready to tell the world." Her fingers hesitated. She wasn't sure if she was ready. She feared that opening it might pull her back into pain she had only just begun to breathe through. But something deep inside whispered that this was the moment he had written it for. She unfolded it slowly. "Sandra, you've always believed stories heal people. You said once that acting isn't about pretending. It's about remembering the truth of being human. You were right. This is why I'm writing this. I want you to tell our story, not for fame, not for sympathy, but for everyone who has ever loved quietly and lost without closure. The world needs gentle reminders that love doesn't end where life does. It continues in the choices we make after." She paused, her throat tightening. His words felt both like a wound and a remedy. "I've spent my life surrounded by lights, cameras, and scripts. But the moments that stayed with me were always off-screen, when kindness happened without anyone watching. I want people to know that. Tell them that being good doesn't need applause. Tell them that forgiveness is a kind of courage. Tell them that silence can hold love louder than words ever could." Her tears fell onto the page. She turned to the last paragraph. "When you feel lost, go back to the lake and watch the reflection. The light that touches the water is the same light that once touched both of us. It never fades. It only changes shape. Make sure the world sees that light too." She pressed the letter against her heart, closing her eyes. The lake shimmered quietly in front of her, and for the first time since he had gone, she didn't feel alone. She felt guided. That evening, she began writing. Not a script, not a memoir, something different, something honest. She wrote about their friendship, their bond, the letters, the unfinished painting, the meaning behind his silence. She didn't dramatize it. She wrote it as it was, real, raw, human. Every word came with tears, but also with peace. She titled it, "The Light Between Silence." As she wrote, something remarkable happened. The creative block that had haunted her for years dissolved. It was as if her soul had been waiting to speak. Every page felt like breathing again, like finding her way home through words. By the end of the week, she had written over 100 pages. Her hands hurt, but her heart felt lighter than it had in months. She called her publisher, who had been waiting for her next book for years, and simply said, "It's not fiction this time." When the book was released, it wasn't promoted as a love story. It was described as a reflection on kindness, grief, and the people who change us quietly. But the readers knew. They could feel the truth between the lines. Within days, it became a phenomenon, not because of celebrity curiosity, but because people found themselves inside it. Strangers wrote letters saying the story helped them forgive, helped them reach out to someone they had lost, helped them believe that love could exist without possession. At interviews, when asked if the story was about Keanu, Sandra only smiled and said, "It's about a man who believed kindness was its own kind of art." Behind that gentle smile, she carried the memory of his letters and the promise she had kept. Yet even in peace, there was something unresolved. She still had unopened letters from the box, each one marked with a moment she hadn't yet faced. One night, as rain fell softly outside, she took the next one. It was labeled, "Open when you forgive yourself." She hesitated, then opened it. "You've always carried guilt for things that were never your fault. I saw it in your eyes back then, the way you blamed yourself for not saying enough, not doing enough, not saving enough people. But love isn't about saving. It's about being. You were there when it mattered, and that was enough. Stop punishing yourself for being human. The world is already heavy enough. Be gentle with yourself the way you've always been with others." She covered her mouth, the sob escaping before she could stop it. She whispered into the quiet room, "How did you know everything I never said?" But she already knew the answer. He had always seen her more clearly than she saw herself. From that night onward, she made it her mission to live the way he had asked, not by clinging to the past, but by giving the love she had left to others. She started a foundation in his name, focused on supporting struggling artists, offering scholarships to those who created from empathy rather than ambition. The motto she chose came from his letter, "Be kind without applause." As years passed, the cabin by the lake became a sanctuary not just for her, but for others too. Young writers and painters would visit to find peace. She would tell them, "This place was built by silence, but silence here means love." One afternoon, a journalist visited her for an anniversary interview about the book. During the conversation, he asked gently, "Do you still visit him here?" She smiled softly. "He never left." The journalist laughed, thinking she meant it metaphorically. But later that day, as Sandra stood by the lake holding the camera he left her, she took another photo. The reflection in the water showed two figures again, clearer this time, side by side, and when she looked closer, she realized something new. In the reflection, the sunlight had formed the word peace. Her knees went weak, and she whispered, "I hear you." For the first time in years, she laughed, a full, deep, tearful laugh that felt like freedom. That night, back in the cabin, she opened the final letter. It was short. "You did it, Sandy. You turned the silence into light. Now live freely. That's the only way to keep me alive." She pressed the letter to her chest, eyes closed, and whispered, "You're still here." The wind outside shifted, carrying the faint sound of waves. It felt almost like an answer. But when she turned to the painting one last time, something had changed again. There was now a golden light surrounding the figures on the dock, as if the sunset itself had blessed them. She smiled softly. "Good night, my friend," she whispered. "I'll keep the promise." Yet as she turned off the light and walked toward the door, she noticed something unexpected. On the floor beneath the table, hidden by the edge of the rug, was another small envelope, one she hadn't seen before. Written on it, in his handwriting, were 3 words that stopped her breath. "For our future." For our future. The envelope sat in her hand like a living thing, soft from years of waiting. Outside, the sky over the lake was turning silver with dawn. Sandra could hear the wind moving through the pines, the quiet rhythm of waves brushing the dock, and the faint hum of her own heartbeat. She stared at the words again. For our future. She almost didn't open it. Part of her was afraid that this was truly the last of him, that once she read it, there would be nothing left to find. But then she remembered what he'd written before. Some stories never end. They just change shape. With trembling fingers, she unsealed the flap. Inside was a single sheet of paper and an old photograph. She looked at the photo first. It was from years ago, a candid shot from the movie set. She was laughing mid-sentence, and he was looking at her, not the camera. His smile was quiet but complete, as if in that single second he had found everything he'd ever needed. On the back of the photo, he had written in small letters, "This is what peace looks like." Her throat tightened as she unfolded the paper. "Sandra," it began, "if you've come this far, it means you didn't let grief turn you into stone. I knew you wouldn't. This letter isn't about goodbye. It's about what comes after. You always said that love is meant to build something, not just feel something. That's why this is called For Our Future." She wiped her tears and read on. "There's a foundation in my name, one I never spoke about publicly. It's small, helps children who lost family, gives them art supplies, music lessons, books. I've arranged for you to lead it now if you choose, but don't do it because of me. Do it because you understand what it means to turn pain into creation. I left you everything you need. The cabin, the letters, the art, they're yours now, to keep the light moving forward." She pressed her palm against her chest, feeling every word settle into her heart. "And if someday you meet someone who reminds you of the way the world felt when we laughed, don't hold back. Let love find you again. Promise me that. That's our future, too, is not staying trapped in memory, but growing from it. I'll be part of every kind thing you do." The letter ended with one final line. "And when you stand by the lake and the wind moves, know that's me saying thank you." The page slipped from her hands as she cried, not from sadness, but from something deeper, a release she hadn't known she needed. The sunrise broke through the window, painting the walls gold, the same color he used to describe as the light that forgives. She stood, walked outside barefoot, and went to the dock. The air was cool, full of scent from pine and water. She held the photo against her heart and whispered, "You gave me peace. Now I'll give it to others." A gentle wind rose from the lake, touching her face like a hand. The water rippled once, twice, then stilled. She closed her eyes and smiled through her tears. The months that followed changed her life. She opened the foundation he had described, naming it the Silent Light Project. Its purpose was simple: to give hope quietly, without spotlight, without noise. Children who had lost parents, artists who had lost courage, people who had lost direction. They came there and found warmth, the kind he had always carried. She spent her mornings teaching art to children by the lake, and her evenings writing letters to strangers who wrote to her after reading The Light Between Silence. Every word she wrote carried a part of him, his calm, his humility, his infinite gentleness. The world began to notice, but she never sought attention. She refused interviews about their story. Instead, she spoke about kindness, resilience, and what it meant to love without expectation. One journalist asked her, "Do you think he'd be proud of you?" She smiled softly and said, "He'd say, 'You finally learned how to live slowly.'" Years passed. The cabin aged gracefully, surrounded by flowers and laughter from the children who visited every summer. The painting of the two figures on the dock now hung inside the foundation's main hall. The sunset in it seemed to glow brighter each year, as though the light itself was still alive. One evening, as Sandra sat by the window of the cabin, gray hair falling gently across her shoulders, she held the old camera again and the one he had given her. She aimed it at the lake one last time and clicked. The sound echoed softly. She took the film out, developed it herself in the small dark room he had once built, and waited. When the final image appeared, she gasped softly. In the photo, she stood on the dock looking at the water, but next to her was another figure, faint, gentle, half-transparent, smiling. She didn't cry this time. She only whispered, "I know." That night, she lit a candle and opened her journal, the same one where she had once kept the letter she never sent. She wrote her final entry. "Dear Keanu, I kept every promise. The cabin is alive with laughter. The lake is still calm. Your art still breathes. The children you helped now help others. You were right. Love didn't end. It just learned how to live differently. Thank you for showing me that silence can be full of meaning. Thank you for letting me be part of your story. I hope you can see how bright the light has become." She closed the journal, placed it beside the painting, and blew out the candle. Outside, the night was clear, full of stars reflected on the lake like scattered silver petals. For a moment, the wind rose gently, rustling the trees, carrying a whisper that brushed against her ear. "Thank you, Sandy," she smiled, eyes glistening, and whispered back, "Always." The camera on the table flashed once, as if capturing that last exchange. And then the cabin fell silent again, not with emptiness, but with peace. Years later, the Silent Light Foundation continued to grow. People visited the lake from all over the world, leaving letters of their own, to loved ones, to friends, to those they never had the courage to thank. The dock became a place of healing, where silence spoke louder than words. No one knew who had painted the artwork on the wall, or who took the photograph of the woman by the lake with the faint silhouette beside her. But every visitor felt something gentle in that place, something that reminded them that love never really leaves. In the end, her life became what his final letter had wished for, a continuation, not an ending. The world moved on. The seasons changed, but the lake remained. And sometimes, in the quietest mornings, when sunlight touched the water just right, two figures could be seen reflected there, sitting side by side, hand in hand, at peace. The story doesn't end. It simply rests in the light they left behind.